front line of policing is loud, but the voices behind it, they're a lot louder and I think, frankly, a lot more interesting. Hi, I'm Bob Plaschke, and this is First Response. This is the #1 podcast that takes you behind the badge and uncovers real stories and experiences of first responders from all walks of life and the topics that shape public safety today. If you're curious about the guy or the gal behind the hero, and they are indeed truly heroes, and the topics that they care about, take a listen. This is kind of your front row seat to hearing some of the really interesting voices out there, and more importantly, the heroes. This podcast is sponsored by Pepperball, where I have the honor to serve as CEO. Pepperball creates non-lethal alternatives to guns police use to keep themselves and the public safe. Well, today, folks, this is a special day for me personally. I live in the Silicon Valley, and I live in a county that is adjacent to, I live in San Mateo County, and it's adjacent to Santa Clara County. So I am a stone's throw away from Santa Clara. And in fact, I spend a lot of my time there personally. And we have the sheriff of Santa Clara County on today as our guest, Sheriff Jonsen. And Sheriff, it's an honor and a privilege to have you here this morning. Your resume and pedigree is fantastic. Starting all the way in Los Angeles with the county sheriff's department, working your way up, and then coming up here to run municipal departments in Menlo Park, where I mentioned to you before we started that I live right next to, in the Palo Alto. And then now that you run one of the largest and most well-known and recognized sheriff's agencies, sheriffs or counties in the country. So thank you so much for coming on. My first question is it was it a big deal from moving from Los Angeles to the Silicon Valley? Was it that's a bit of a difference for those who don't know much about California?
Yeah, well, first of all, Bob, it's a privilege to be on here. And yes, I'm smiling, and your listeners won't be able to see that, but I'm smiling to that question because, yeah, it was quite the transition. Coming from the largest sheriff's department in the world, where I spent 27 years, to taking over what I would consider a small municipality at Menlo Park was quite an adjustment. And I will say, at first, I had no idea how that would go. And if I'd be able to transition or really utilize some of the skills I had developed in Los Angeles and apply them in a city like Menlo Park. But had a phenomenal run there, was chief there for 5 years, and really, really enjoyed it, and found that the men and women, whether in a large agency or a small agency, are equally committed to serving their communities. So it's been a fun ride. I've really enjoyed my career. And it's been 40 years now. It started in 1986. And, I did a pebbles throw from Menlo Park to taking over Palo Alto, where I was just before becoming sheriff here in Santa Clara County.
And folks wouldn't know, but Menlo Park and Palo Alto are a little bit interesting in that they're right in the heart of Silicon Valley, and they're right at the heart of the tech center. So Stanford University is headquartered or based in Palo Alto, but there are some what I would call more economically different and disadvantaged parts of Menlo Park and Palo Alto. So I think officers, there's a large highway that intersects these different bedroom communities, and so it is a bit of a diversity in that context, right? I would imagine that you had officers going from one side to the other with a bit of change in scenery. Was that interesting for you to see, or maybe you saw a lot of that in Los Angeles as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting and very accurate. In Menlo Park, I found fascinating, because when I transitioned up there, I wasn't really expecting a neighborhood because of the home values and, the proximity with Facebook being their main corporate partner there. I wasn't sure how the economic status was going to be, but to your point, there were definitely neighborhoods that were more challenged than others and had pretty significant issues going on. And those were the areas that, from a police chief standpoint, we had to be very creative, because we just didn't have the resources maybe Los Angeles had. And part of my career in Los Angeles was running a major crime fighting initiative in the Antelope Valley. And the reason I bring that up is just because I really wanted to apply some of those strategies to Menlo Park to address their community concerns. And we were able to do it, but we had to do it differently. And I found it to work very, very well. Again, going back to the credit to the men and women of that agency. But to your comment, yes, there were times because we just didn't have the resources. There would only be a few officers out there that would have to traverse that entire city from the north end to the south end, east and west. And even though it's small, there are some traffic issues which could delay some response times. So, but we worked it all out at the end of the day.
Well, this will transition to you now becoming the sheriff. What working in a sheriff's organization is a lot different than actually running for sheriff. What was the background that compelled you to actually run for public office?
Yeah, that now I'm actually laughing because you're 100% accurate on that. It's one thing to be appointed as a police chief or even running a command in a sheriff structure, which I did down in Los Angeles at Lancaster Station, than being the sheriff. And really what prompted it for up here, I was very content being the chief at Palo Alto at the time. And I had gone there from Menlo Park, as I mentioned, in 2018 and was really enjoying that. It was a great partnership. And to be honest with you, I thought that would be my last command. I'm turning 64 this year. So at the time, I was in my late 50s at Palo Alto. And it wasn't, I'll just be honest, if there hadn't been the controversy and scandals that were surrounding that organization, the Santa Clara Sheriff's Office at the time, I didn't have any interest or desire to take over another agency. But really where it got to a point in 21 and 22, it was becoming clear that my predecessor was not going to run again, or most likely wouldn't run again. And then the question came, well, who will and who can? And it just, when everybody started looking around the room, it did make sense. I had a very strong background in a sheriff's organization from Los Angeles. I understood the politics from my time in Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and I understood how it should be ran, in my opinion. So I did. I threw my name in the hat. I was clearly the underdog, joined the race late, but, things turned out, and I've been very much enjoying it over the last 3.5 years. And fortunately, my fingers are definitely crossed, and everybody should see that. I'm extremely happy that I ran it unopposed. So I'm locked into this for several more years and excited to be part of that organization.
I've always thought about the notion of running for public office because it's the ultimate definition of service. I mean, certainly being a police officer, you're serving your community. Running actually for public office almost seems like you take it to almost the next level. Was it interesting to go out and shake hands and ask for people's votes? I mean, that's not typically what police officers do.
You just it's almost like you're tickling me because it's just everything you're saying is funny because campaigning, and no disrespect and to anybody that's ever done it, I actually think you should seek psychological help before jumping into a political race. It was not what I expected. It was excruciating. Yes, to your comment, I loved the interaction, going out, meeting people, introducing myself. But, politics has gotten a little different in the last decade, and it's not as pretty and respectful as it should be, in my opinion. And it can get a little nasty. And what I didn't take into account was now my role was going to impact and affect my entire family structure because people would be looking at every aspect of my life. And I will say this, it's interesting because of my current role, my background, I'm pretty sure when it comes to politics, there's very few that can say they've had several comprehensive law enforcement background checks done. And I had already done 3. So I felt good about that part of it. But the reality is the campaigning and asking for money, fundraising, that was excruciating because that is not something we normally do in law enforcement. And so the fundraising, I have to acknowledge, was probably Well, I would say in history, I was probably the worst fundraiser that's ever ran for political office, because my campaign team kept telling me, you got to raise money. And I can't do it. I can't ask. So I'm happy I ran unopposed this time around, because I was not looking forward to having to do all that again.
Well, and that's a testament to the what you've been able to accomplish at Santa Clara, that you would run unopposed, right? That no one would step up. I'm glad that you did, and I'm glad you didn't have to raise money, because there is this perception of quid pro quo, and that's the last thing a police officer wants to ever do, right? Is to in effect take money and like, okay, what's on the other side of that donation, above and beyond hoping, people wanting to see you, to succeed. So I know it's difficult. I know I talked to a lot of sheriffs in that context, and it's the thing they absolutely hate. Because, being a police officer, a career officer sworn to the Constitution, you have to stay above the fray, and you have to stay above reproach. And that's the one thing that can kind of walk you unintentionally into dangerous waters. So I'm glad for you that you didn't have to do it.
Well, and so was I. And it's interesting. And one of the things I've always been able to fall back by, because to your point, it happens, right? Somebody will say, hey, or they'll donate. And then I've had this happen. They'll come back and they'll ask for something that is just flat out inappropriate. And Yep. I'll give you an example. We'll keep it super, super simple, but it's not uncommon for people to call up and say, hey, my son or my daughter or myself, I got a speeding ticket. Can you help? And for me, it's super easy, because I made my own son go to traffic school, and he had asked if I could help. And I said, no, were you speeding? He acknowledged, yeah. Then I said, all right, we'll take accountability for it. So, if I made my own son go to traffic school, they can have their son or daughter go to traffic school as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about Santa Clara itself. I don't think many people know much about it. It sits in the heart of Silicon Valley. It is where large Silicon Valley companies like Cisco and Google are located. Tell us size, scope, challenges. Just kind of give us a bit of a snapshot of the challenge from a policing perspective.
Yeah, it's a great county, in my opinion. One of the best, to your comment earlier. Because of everything that's going on. It's got a great economic engine, even though we're going through some challenging times. But it's it's a big county, and its population is approximately 2 million. Geographically, it's almost the size of the Antelope Valley, where I worked in Los Angeles, so encompassing about well over 600 square miles. Our organization, we have close to 1,800 employees between the sworn and the non-sworn, the professional staff. We have a lot going on and this is where it differs between a municipality, and sometimes the general public doesn't understand the nuances. But when I was a police chief, all I had to do was provide law enforcement services for that particular city. As a sheriff and the sheriff's organization, it's far broader. We not only provide law enforcement services, we oversee the county jail, we provide security for our courts, our transportation system, our hospitals. So we have a lot going on, and it's every day there is something that will keep you busy. But again, I am just super happy that it's filled with committed members, and we get the job done every day. And this year in particular, as you know, was probably one of our more challenging from a staffing and providing support, because we were the first county in history to host both the Super Bowl and World Cup events in the same calendar year. So it's been a huge lift to provide and make sure our community stays safe for this first 6 months of the year.
The sheriff's offices are just a stone's throw away from Levi Stadium and from the San Jose airport and from San Jose. There's also a professional soccer stadium down the street. Santa Clara University is another stone's throw away. So you do have a very diverse kind of ecosystem of different types of folks coming in and out of of the county, and you guys do a great job. Pepperball, we don't talk about Pepperball on the podcast, but we do sell and do support the Santa Clara County Agency. They do a fantastic job. In this kind of scope, how big is your budget? And and I think people are going to be a bit surprised by the size. But what's your budget on a yearly basis?
Yeah, every year it's been very consistent, usually right around 480 to close to 500 million. It takes a lot of money to run an organization of this size. And we continue to do that. And that's the thing that I said. And most people would say, well, $500 million is a tremendous amount of money. But you got to remember, we're 24 hours a day, we're operating 7 days a week, every day of the year. There is no breaks. So that comes with a cost. But again, I think we do a phenomenal job. Our contract cities have always, that we've been providing services for over 70 years, have always been genuinely very pleased with our service. We have a lot of work going on in the jails, but again, we get by every day and we keep moving forward. And I'm happy because I think morale has definitely increased over the last several years. We've done a lot of very creative initiatives to make sure our workforce stays healthy and well. So we'll be there today, tomorrow, and the next day.
Well, I think people don't. I know that my friends and people that I deal with in the business side don't have any sense of size and scope of these agencies, right? They call 911 and someone shows up, and they're happy and happy to make to pay the taxes for that to happen. But these are very large, sophisticated operations. You're the CEO, in effect, of a $500 million company. And you have, how you're judged is a very, certainly law and order, but it is, there's a lot of factors into, what you would call success in the sense of how the community views the use of their taxpayer dollars. I will agree. Santa Clara County's done a great job and does have a great reputation. I want to talk about the part of the county that most people don't want to ever see but eats up a lot of those dollars, and that is the corrections facilities.
Right.
How many inmates or folks do you have in the facility in Santa Clara?
Yeah, it's been very, very consistent since I've been sheriff over the last 3.5 years. It ranges on any given day between 2,800 and 3,200. Prior to the pandemic, they were hovering closer to 4,000 inmates a day. But through a lot of creative resources and pretrial services, they've been able to lower that number and keep it down to right around that 3,000 mark. And that's where it's been, like I said, very, very consistently over the last 3.5 years while I've been sheriff.
I mentioned to you, Sheriff, before we started that I had just taken a tour of the Men's County Jail in Los Angeles, where I think you actually served when you first started years and years ago. It's a very big jail. I think they had 4,000 inmates. I have to say it was not, it was sombering, I think is the best way of saying it. It was not, this kind of sights and smells. It's not an easy place to walk through for sure. And certainly, you don't want to be in that facility, in terms of making bad life choices. But I felt really, it felt challenged for the folks who have to manage those corrections facilities. That cannot be easy to live and work in that environment.
It's definitely not. And, it's interesting because that conversation, that environment has really been the center right now. We also in Santa Clara, our jails are, approaching their life's end. And we've been in conversations of building a new facility of some sort. But as you experienced down there with Men's Central Jail, that's been around for decades. And again, you go in, it's dark, it's very few windows, it's concrete, it's damp, it's cold, and it's not the best living environment. And to manage that, you also have to remember not only is it challenging for the people who are incarcerated there, it's also challenging and takes its toll on the men and women that serve there every day, because they're spending a vast portion of their day, 10 to 12 hours, if not more, inside that facility as well. So as a leader, as a manager, it's really incumbent that you're doing everything you can to not only make that environment more livable for the people that are housed there, giving them opportunities, programs, access to tools, but also making sure the well-being of the workforce stays as best it can. And that's really, in my opinion, paramount for any leader in law enforcement today. First and foremost is taking care of your people so they can continue to take care of those they serve.
No, for sure. And I think that what struck me. I mean, you had deputies in to your point, in these dark environments with a lot of noise. It was not a pleasant, it would be the opposite of a pleasant work environment. And that has to, I know that wears on you. And we're going to talk about health and wellness in a couple of minutes. But before we get there, what does it cost to build a new corrections facility? That must be hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more.
Yeah, I would say more. And so, it is really starting to get very, very expensive. And the reason it's becoming astronomically expensive, because it's not just a housing facility. And that's what most people think of when they think of a jail. It's just a cell. Well, there's far more to it today. You have to have program space. You have to have exercise space. You have to have health space. You have to have medical facilities within it. So basically what they're becoming, they're not just a housing facility. They're a housing facility with built-in medical care, dental care, programming. So it's all inclusive. And that's where the costs really start to get high, because especially to the earlier comment on the environment, they're no longer building them to just be concrete boxes, nor should they. They're building them to where the environment is livable, meaning the lighting, the conditions are not so cumbersome that they start to deteriorate the mental health of those that are inside those buildings.
Is that something that is on your to-do list? I didn't warn you about the question, but
yeah.
Is that on your to-do list to try to get funding for a new corrections?
No, absolutely. It was something that almost got approved before I came in, but without question, before the end of my second term, I would be ecstatic and extremely happy if we could get the Board of Supervisors to approve a new facility, because again, everybody, including those that are incarcerated, deserve a better living environment.
For sure. No, and that was my takeaway. I mean, again, it's interesting. TV shows do not that try to portray policing. They do it in ways that over dramatic. It's overly dramatic. The officers pulling their pistols and the revolvers, the sidearms, much more than that really happens.
Right.
A lot more interaction in that context. And when they show the incarceration, they don't really do it justice. I think it would be almost too sombering of a picture for TV, frankly. And I think. So I don't think the public really has a good sense. And as a taxpayer, I'd be 100% supportive of new corrections facilities, because, to your point, they were built at a time and in a place, different than where we are today. And we need a new approach to how folks who will spend their time there need to spend it, and the people that manage those facilities, because it's unfair to both as it exists today. Not to put words in your mouth.
No, but you're correct. And the emphasis right now is on not punishment, but rehabilitation. But to do rehabilitation, you need the space to actually offer programs that bring value to those individuals' lives and that they can use when they re-enter society. So again, fingers crossed, I'm hopeful that we'll get one accomplished and approved for Santa Clara County. In San Mateo, you have a relatively new jail. It's a beautiful facility. If you ever have an opportunity, go by there and take a tour there, because I think you'll see dramatically different than what you experienced down in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's a good point, by the way. You're right, because I do live in San Mateo, and I've been to the police agency, which is beautiful to your point. And all the facilities, I have not actually been to the corrections facility, but I will put that on my to-do list. That's a good idea, because I'd love to see what a more recently built one looks like in the context of trying to solve some of the challenges that you outlined.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn the rest of the discussion to officer health and wellness. It's a topic that I am passionate about, and I know you are, and it's one of the reasons we're excited to have you on the podcast, is that you are one of the leading national voices on that topic. You're chairing the California State Sheriff's Association Wellness Committee. I think you've done some work at Stanford on the compassion cultivation training. It makes perfect sense in your role as a leader in terms of focusing on your employees, that this is logical that you'd be passionate about it. But how did you start your journey? And what are you doing today? What are you focused on? What are you excited about?
Yeah, great question. I mean, my journey, and it's actually something I've been outlining and talking quite a bit about, because my journey up until 2015 was just suck it up. And that led to high blood pressure, sleep deprivation, a lot of other things that went on during those 27 years up to that point, or whatever it was. But in 2015, actually, by chance, the mayor of Menlo Park actually asked if I had ever heard of mindfulness. And at the time, it was not something being discussed in law enforcement. But to her credit, I ended up looking into it, going to a retreat, seeing the value of mindfulness for, really addressing some of the issues facing our profession. And then it was having to find a way how to integrate it into our profession. So I took a deep dive in working with UCLA, Stanford, to your comment, developing compassion cultivation training. That's now post-certified and offered throughout the state. It's called Courageous Heart through the Compassion Institute. Courageous Heart, the human behind the badge. And that has been very successful. And that has led into other endeavors that we've been doing. One that I mentioned before we started the podcast was a partnership not only with California sheriffs, but the major sheriffs of America, as well as NewCom, in partnering music and neuroscience together to really help officers, deputies, law enforcement personnel with stress mitigation and enhance better quality sleep. Because sleep is really something that this profession is deprived of, and it leads to all sorts of physical and psychological issues that we really need to start taking on head on.
Yeah, it seems to be I think that's exactly right. I've interviewed a number of folks who talked about some of their mental challenges, and they talked about this vicious cycle of an incident, of the impact of the incident, additional overtime because of the understaffing, that led to being overly tired, not getting good sleep, and then just a kind of an exasperation of the mental challenges that officers face by definition. So tell us more, tell the listeners more about NewCom and how it works.
Yeah, I think I'm super excited about this partnership. Very grateful to NewCom. I'll share a link to the platform. It's something that's free to any law enforcement agency. And it was a partnership that started I'd been working on a book, and then I crafted songs from each of those chapters dealing with stress, the profession, the journey, the outcome, sleep deprivation. Each chapter talks about one of our more significant issues facing this profession. Well, the music kind of started to take off, and 8 songs in particular, one's on suicide, one's on drinking, one's on stress, hypervigilance. They became the core to this roll call listening campaign that's being used throughout agencies, ourselves included, to where it's as simple as playing a song, and then it's partnered and paired with something with NewCom that really gives them the opportunity to listen to a sound wave that helps the wavelength of the brain for stress mitigation and enhanced sleep. So again, they did a phenomenal job pairing the songs and music with one of their platforms. And I think it's something that every officer could use or at least explore. And the beauty was, I've written about wellness for years. Some people listen, some people read it. But for some reason, this music is resonating in a way that's not threatening. People could just listen to the song, listen to the content, the words, the meaning, and say, you know what? That particular song may not be meaning anything to me, but I know people who it does impact and affect. And we've had some really good conversations at some of our briefings stemming from just playing the song and then opening it up for that dialogue to occur.
Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. And I think through my own life, there are songs for whatever reasons that reinforce positive messages and kind of give me hope and courage to fight through what I have to fight through as a human. I can easily see how that works very well. And to your point, it steps away from the words mental health and do you need help and are you okay? Those are all great things to ask, but to a police officer, they can be challenging. They can be words that would put them more on defensive. So the music I can see as a very non-confrontational, kind of safe playground of which they can then maybe be more open to share their issues. Is it music played only at night when they're kind of
no? So the songs, there's 4 albums actually, and they're all available on social media platforms. But on those particular, for the roll call, we took 8 of those songs and made it specific to the NewCom partnership. No, and they can play those. They'll play it at any time in a briefing because, again, it's designed to be done in roll calls. They can play the song, and then they later can utilize the platform from NewCom. They could do that, and usually it is in the evening before bed. They'll turn it on, listen to it, and it's just simple. You just listen to the sound wave. But it's really interesting because two of the songs we found already really resonate with the vast majority of the deputies and officers that have been doing it for a couple of years. One is called The Toll, which talks about the accumulative stress. And we use the reference of a pebble for every incident that you take on and carry. And by the time, a couple of years in, you're carrying thousands of stones, thousands of pebbles, which you don't even realize until they're too heavy to carry anymore. And then the other one that's really been powerful is called End of Watch. And that has to do with the amount of officers that have either committed suicide or been killed in the line of duty. And that's happening far too often. So they're not always the most feel-good songs, but the messages are definitely connecting. And again, to your earlier comment, it's giving people the opportunity to say, you know what, that meant something to me, and let's talk about it. And it's that open dialogue where we're finding tremendous value because these are topics that we generally don't talk about. We just kind of take it in and realize it's part of the job, but it doesn't mean that we have to bear the weight alone.
I couldn't agree more. We have in Pepperball has a training corps of about 40 trainers, and some of them are retired, some of them are still active. And when they get together, there's a lot of camaraderie, but there are times when this group will come together and they'll talk about some of the mental challenges they collectively face. And it's refreshing for me to hear people be more willing to surface those issues, where I think maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, that would have never been the case.
I agree 100%.
And that you can do this at roll call, even if you don't talk about it, you're allowing it to be, you're not legitimizing it. You're encouraging that kind of conversation, whether it happens in the kind of the group there in the conference room, or it happens in the car with their partner as they drive on and do their work. I think it's fantastic. This notion, by the way, and I do this, Sheriff, you already know these statistics, but I say them just in case the person that's listening hasn't heard me say them before. There are as many officers every year that die of suicide than die in the line of action. It's roughly about the same, 1,500 or so. and that police officers have a life expectancy, I think 63 or 64 years old. It's one of the shortest life expectancies of certainly of any profession in the United States, because of what happens on the job and what happens after, to your point, in terms of the mental toll. So the last statistic I always throw out is that an average someone like myself will go through 3 to 4 to 5 traumatic events in their life: a car accident, a divorce, a death of a sibling or a child. Officers go through at least 3 or 4 of those traumatic incidents every year, if not more. And so those pebbles, I think it's a great analogy, those pebbles become huge boulders after 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
How have you personally, I mean, this must be cathartic for you personally, because you have your own share of pebbles, right? You have your own share of boulders, all the incidents you've personally gone through. Has this been for you?
And it's been very cathartic. And I got to say, writing the book, putting it on paper, was very beneficial for me. And I'm very, very transparent on some of those incidents, what it did to me, how it impacted me, how I dealt with it, good or bad, usually bad back in the earlier days. But then it's really gotten to the point where I've realized through mindfulness, compassion training, new comm technology, we don't have to, like I said earlier, we don't have to live our lives that way. We can do this job and we can remain healthy and well, but it takes work on its own. And I think that's where the men and women of this profession have to start prioritizing is their own well-being so they can be there and serve others. So it's been a great journey for me. I have no complaints, but even in the music, a lot of people say they've learned more about me through the music than, even my sister is one of them. She's learned more about me and my work through my songs and this music than, conversations, because that's how closed off we are. We don't even share these details with those closest around us. And that, again, that needs to change as well. And so, I know it's working and it's catching on, because even on the YouTube, we made a lot of those songs we created videos for. They're not professional grade. They're good, in my opinion. They'll do. But we've had in the first 90 days, close to 6,000 views already of these particular videos on the YouTube channel. So we know people are looking at it maybe outside of briefing as well, which is a good thing. Whatever works, whether it's listening, talking, or watching, I don't care, as long as they do something with the material to the betterment of their own well-being.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I will, in this podcast, I'll put the links to those YouTube channels in addition to the roll call, and that it's free for every agency. That is what a generous is not the right word for it, but what a very productive use of your time to help the broader policing community. So thank you, Sheriff. Unfortunately, we're well past our time. I've so enjoyed this and so learned from it. I have my one last question, which is, we make a small donation in your name to a charity. Which charity can we donate to?
Well, I would have to say, since my mom passed away at a young age from cancer, and we have several people within our own workforce dealing with that right now, I would say I would love a donation to one of the cancer foundations. And I'll leave that to you, Bob. And if you want, I can send you a link later on, a particular one. But anything to do with cancer prevention, I would really appreciate.
Sheriff, thank you so much for spending the time with us. It was great to meet you. Great to feel even better about living where I do. That you and your team are there and to protect myself, my family, our friends, our community. But you're also investing heavily in terms of taking care of your own folks, which is in policing, I think is got to be the top priority. So thank you for taking the time with us.
Well, thank you, Bob. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, folks, this was just a fascinating discussion. To meet someone who he had no interest in being an elected official, was going to happily retire as a police chief, but stepped up and stepped into this leadership role and is now making the best of it. I think it's a nice kind of reminder of all of the good people that are in policing. And there are lots and lots and lots of very good people that do each their own way step into those roles and do more for their communities. I thought it was interesting to hear the sheriff's perspective about a new corrections facility. This will be a new, in addition to mental health, a new challenge or a new thing that I'll be more actively speaking on because it's necessary. None of us want to go into those facilities because you can guess what you might feel, and that no one deserves to live in that space and no one deserves to work in that space. And we do have the ability as a community and as a country to address that. We just need to do it. It's not easy, but we need to do it. So finally, the fact that this is yet another way and we've had multiple speakers talk about their approaches to mental health and wellness for the policing community. What an interesting way of doing this vis-a-vis music as a way to connect with folks. So guys and gals, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back soon with another exciting version of First Response, the #1 leading podcast, talking about the people behind the badge. Thanks again to Pepperball, where I am privileged to be the CEO who sponsors all of this, makes this happen. So everyone be safe out there and have a great day.